You are standing on the Giza plateau. You are looking up at the most analyzed, most photographed, most visited structure in human history, the Great Pyramid of Khufu. You expect perfection. You expect mathematical precision. And for the vast majority of its 140-meter height, you get it. The geometry, the casing angle, the structural mass. It is, by any standard, a masterpiece of ancient engineering. But then, you reach the summit. Instead of a sharp, elegant termination, a point that would complete the geometric proof of its architecture, you are greeted by a stump. A wide, ragged platform of exposed core blocks, roughly 11 meters across, littered with the debris of centuries. The official narrative says this is the inevitable work of time. Erosion, grave robbers, stone looters. We are told to accept that the top just faded away, that the pyramid slowly crumbled into the plateau over 4.5 millennia. But here is the thing. That account does not survive a walk around the plateau. Look at the neighboring pyramid of Khufu. Despite losing its fine white limestone casing, despite enduring the exact same desert wind, the exact same earthquakes, and the exact same human interference, it retains its apex. The top is still there. The Great Pyramid is the only structure on the plateau that suffered this unique, localized trauma. For over a century, serious researchers have looked at these measurements and kept arriving at the same uncomfortable conclusion. The history of the summit of the Great Pyramid is not a story of 4,000 years of slow decay. It is a story of a deliberate, violent, and surprisingly recent destruction. The honest answer from the historical record is this. The Great Pyramid kept its summit for over 4,000 years, and then, in a window of less than 60 years, it was cut off. This is not a conspiracy. It is something more mundane and in many ways more troubling. It is the story of how the very people who came to document the ancient world ended up destroying its most vital evidence. Let us be precise. Why do we accept the erosion theory? Because it is comforting. It tells us that time is a patient, uniform force. But ancient structures, specifically pyramids, do not erode uniformly. A pyramid is a stack of core masonry, originally protected by a casing of polished Tura limestone. Stripping the casing is like removing the siding of a house. It exposes the structural core to the elements. But the Great Pyramid's core blocks, especially at the summit, are massive. These are limestone blocks, many weighing several tons. If you observe the Khufu pyramid, you see that despite losing its entire casing, it still maintains its shape. Its apex is intact. Now, consider the Great Pyramid. If erosion were responsible, why is the damage localized to the summit? Why are the core blocks lower down, exposed to the same wind and the same expansion and contraction cycle, still relatively stable? The math of the missing stone does not look like decay. It looks like removal. And to understand when that removal happened, we have to look at what the people who stood on that summit actually saw. The Romans documented nearly everything. Their aqueducts, their roads, their legal codes, their military campaigns. For the most ambitious construction project in the history of their empire, the records are essentially absent. But they did visit. Diodorus Siculus, in the 1st century BC, described the summit of the Great Pyramid as being 6 cubits on each side. That is roughly 2.76 meters. Pliny the Elder, a century later, reported a summit perimeter of 16.5 feet, which translates to a summit roughly 1.22 meters per side. These are tiny platforms. They suggest the Pyramidion, the Capstone, and perhaps only 2 or 3 courses of stone beneath it had been lost to time or very early looting. Fast forward to the year 1200. Abd al-Latif al-Baghdadi visits. He describes the casing stones as mostly intact and measures the summit at 10 Turkish cubits, roughly 5.78 meters across. So, in the 12 centuries between Diodorus and al-Baghdadi, the summit expanded by about 4 meters. That is slow, incremental loss. That is the erosion and casual looting we expect. Then, the narrative changes. In 1395, A French traveler witnesses masons dismantling the casing stones of the Great Pyramid to rebuild Cairo after a massive earthquake. This was not casual vandalism. This was industrial-scale quarrying. Over the next 300 years, the outer skin of the pyramid was stripped away, and with that stripping, the summit lost another few courses of height. But even after all of that, even after the Middle Ages, even after centuries of tourists, the summit was still fundamentally intact. Until the year 1765. Nathaniel Davison, a British diplomat, climbed the Great Pyramid in 1765. He did something that is rare in the history of Egyptology. He was systematic. He measured every single course of stone. His sketch of the summit is our smoking gun. Davison recorded 6 large, scattered blocks sitting on top of course 206. He measured the summit of that course at 523 meters across. Now, why is that number crucial? Because Davison also noted that course 206 was oversized. These blocks were nearly 1 meter tall. They were monumental. For over a century, historians have ignored Davison's manuscript because it remained unpublished. But the data within it is precise. If the summit was 5.23 meters in 1765, and it is nearly 11 meters today, when did the other half disappear? This is not a matter of debate. This is a matter of measurement. The courses 206, 205, and 204 that Davison saw, that he sketched, that he meticulously described, are gone. And here is the part that stays with you. We know those courses were oversized. We know they were structurally critical to the taper of the pyramid. They did not fall off. They were removed. We are looking at a demolition project that took place in a window of about 50 years, between 1765 and the early 19th century. So we come to the part of the story that historians least enjoy telling. In 1798, Napoleon Bonaparte invades Egypt. He brings the Commission des Sciences et des Arts. These men were the intellectual elite of France. They were geologists, astronomers, engineers. They needed to map Egypt. They needed the Great Pyramid as their primary survey station for the entire Giza plateau. But they had a problem. The summit Davison sketched in 1765, jagged, uneven, 5 meters wide, was useless for modern precision instruments like the theodolite. You cannot perform a multi-point triangulation survey on a surface that is tilted and obstructed by 6 massive, irregular stone blocks. They needed a working platform. This is not a conspiracy. It is something more mundane and in many ways more troubling. It is the inertia of institutional narrative. We see the description de l'Égypte as a monumental achievement of science. And it is. But we must be honest about what was sacrificed for that precision. The destruction was surgical. They did not tear down the pyramid. They cleared the summit. They created a level, stable workspace for the first modern archaeological survey of Egypt. The debris from that work, the oversized blocks from course 206, was pushed over the side. That is why the base of the Great Pyramid is buried in a mound of rubble. It is not just the casing stones. It is the summit of the Great Pyramid itself, lying forgotten in the sand, indistinguishable from the other debris of centuries. The truthful conclusion is the one historians least enjoy giving. We do not know with absolute certainty. No French document says, "We cut the top off the pyramid today." But the convergence of evidence, the measurements before and after, the presence of the only organized force capable of doing it, the practical need for a working platform, points in one direction. The Great Pyramid stood for 4,500 years. It survived the collapse of the civilization that built it. It outlasted the Greeks, the Romans, the Caliphates, the Mamelukes, the Ottomans. Through all of that, it lost a few meters of height. Slow, patient erosion across 4 millennia. And then, in less than a human lifetime, it lost more of its summit than it had in the previous 2,000 years combined. Our grandparents grew up with a confident story of the ancient world, simple beginnings, steady progress, each century cleverer than the last. The flat summit of the Great Pyramid gently refuses that story. It says that the keepers of knowledge are sometimes its destroyers, that the Enlightenment, for all its gifts, left scars on the very monuments it came to study. This is the inertia of institutional narrative, a story so convenient that nobody bothered to question it. Until you measure, until you count the courses, until you compare Davison's sketch from 1765 to the summit you can climb today, and realize that half of what he saw is simply not there anymore. Leave your theory in the comments below. We read every single one. Thank you for watching. If this kind of careful, evidence-based exploration is what you are here for, stay curious and never stop asking questions.